Chapter 39, Been Around the World. King's Landing, 294 AC, Richard Lonmouth sat in the tavern, contemplating the clear message he had received from the king. As he waited, he couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. Was this truly a good idea? He felt a surge of pride knowing the king was concerned for his family. The visit to his grand-uncle at the Wall had clearly affected him, and the king's desire to help Richard's aunt and uncle was commendable. But was this man really the best choice for the task? Surely, there were others better suited for this mission. Richard considered various alternatives, but sending anyone else would only complicate matters further. Could they guarantee the safety of his relatives? Could they be trusted? He found himself questioning the very man they were sending. Despite his reservations, the king was adamant that this was the right man for the job. Taking a deep breath, Richard set aside his doubts and arranged the meeting, feeling a swell of pride that the king was entrusting him with such a decision. As he mulled over the rest of his plans, he noticed the man enter the tavern. Alice led him to Richard's table, nodding to her as she quickly stepped away, only to return moments later with a tankard of ale, placing it in front of the guest. "Anything else?" she asked softly. "No, Alice, that'll be all for now," Richard replied, watching as she returned to her post near the bar. Alice was one of his trusted eyes and ears in the establishment. When he had proposed hiring her to Tyrion, he had been pleasantly surprised by the dwarf's acceptance. It seemed Tyrion enjoyed the game and viewed this as a strategic move, one he could counteract if needed. So, Alice was hired but kept at a distance from the rest of the staff. It didn't matter, she wasn't there to observe them. She had already informed Richard about a hidden passage behind a room upstairs. "What did you bring me here for?" the hound asked, his tone gruff. "I have a proposition for you," Richard replied. "If you want your cock sucked, ask Blondie over there," the hound shot back. Richard said gruffly, "No, this is more of a job I'd like to offer you, a well-paying job." "How well-paying?" the hound asked, his interest piqued. "You'll receive 10,000 gold dragons up front, and another 100,000 upon completion. Plus, you'll have access to an additional 10,000 for expenses," Richard explained. "If you want someone killed, hire a damn assassin," the hound replied, emptying his tankard. "You've killed men before," Richard pointed out. "Aye, and I'll kill again, but I don't do it for coin. I don't want you to kill anyone, well, not unless you have to. It's the opposite, actually. I want you to protect someone. You look like you can protect yourself just fine. But if we're going to talk more, you better get Blondie to bring me more ale." Richard smiled and nodded to Alice, signaling her to bring over another round. He was surprised that the hound had reservations about killing. He had assumed that the mention of coin would be enough to sway him. Perhaps the man had more morality than he thought. If so, then the king had been right, and this might very well be the right man for the job. "You hungry?" Richard asked as the hound polished off his second ale. "I could eat, but I won't, not here." "Why not?" "The chicken's bloody vile," the hound said, grimacing. "Very well, shall we?" Richard replied, standing up and motioning toward the stairs. "Yeah, fine. You first, though." Richard nodded again to Alice, who grabbed another 2 tankards of ale and led them up the stairs into a small room. She left the tankards on a table and quickly retreated to create space in the cramped passage. What Richard had to say wasn't ready to be sent back to Tyrion just yet. Once he heard a little knock, he took one of the Alesh and handed the other to the hound. "I want you to go to Essos." "Fuck off." "Why? Do you have a problem with that?" "Damn right I have a problem. It's full of crazy bastards." "You should fit in, then," Richard said with a snort, which did not sit well with the hound. "I'm not crazy." The hound said angrily, I know that. A poor jape. I apologize." Richard looked at him and nodded. "What's in Essos?" "The Targaryen children." I told you, I'm not killing anyone, especially not a child. The hound's voice rose with anger. And I told you, I don't want you to kill anyone. I want you to protect them, the girl especially. What's so precious about the girl? Nothing, but her brother showed some disturbing signs when he was younger. If he's showing them now, or if they've gotten worse, then the girl will need protecting, maybe even from him, Richard explained. 200,000, the hound stated flatly. I thought you said you weren't crazy, Richard replied. I'm not. You want me to go to Essos and protect people the crown wants dead. You're willing to offer 100? Make it 2, and I'll do it. Richard smirked. The king had been right, he'd said it would cost them 200. Richard had tried to keep the cost down, but this whole adventure would end up costing them a fortune. If it meant protecting the king's family, who cared? Fine, but you leave by the end of the week. I've booked passage for you to Bravos. You'll be met there by one of my associates who will direct you further. Speak properly, the hound said, shaking his head. Richard laughed. I'll need you to send me letters once you're with them. I'm not a spy either. I know, and I don't want you to spy. Just let me know where you are and that they're all right. Can you do that? I can. But if you try to screw me over with my coin, I'll gut you. Oh, don't worry. I know that. You'll get your coin. Good, the hound replied as he turned to leave. Sandor. What? He said gruffly. Should anyone try to hurt them? Ha. Don't worry, Lonmouth. That, I'll enjoy. Sandor said as he walked out. Richard smirked as the man left the room. Alice knocked softly, signaling that no one else was around. The hound was far cleverer than Richard had initially given him credit for. They had only met a few times over a decade ago, when the man had still been a boy. Richard remembered him well, which should have raised concerns. Yet it was the final line of the king's message that eased his mind: Sandor is loyal. Climbing the ladder of power had always been Richard's ambition, ever since his days as a ward in Riverrun. Each rung felt distant as he gazed upward, but he had ascended one step at a time and now stood tantalizingly close to the top. As a boy, he had harbored simple, foolish dreams, visions of fiery red hair and bright blue eyes that blinded him to a harsh truth: without position and power, he was nothing. Learning that lesson had been painful, and the scar he covered with his shirt was a testament to that struggle. He glanced down at the woman in the bed. Her hair was the wrong shade of red, her eyes a far duller blue, and he couldn't help but think he deserved better than her less appealing sister. He masked his contempt with a charming smile, but when she caught his gaze, he noticed the love shining in her eyes. Thankfully, she couldn't see the disgust in his. Peter, come back to bed, my love. I'm so wet for you, she said, attempting seduction, and he fought back the urge to retch. Lisa, I can't. Your husband is expecting me. We need to be careful, my love. The words dripped off his tongue like honey. I still want more, Peter, she replied, her eyes fluttering as she tossed her hair back and bared her breast. As do I, my sweet, more and more, but we must wait. He leaned in and kissed her, pulling away quickly when she reached for him. We should just get rid of the old fool. Then we could be together, Peter. We could marry and spend all our days just lying in bed and making love, Lisa said, and he sighed as he watched her drift off into another one of her improbable dreams. It was never supposed to be Lisa, it was Kat, always Kat. If Lisa hadn't been a convenient stepping stone to where he needed to be, he would have never taken her to bed. No matter how hard he tried, closing his eyes and conjuring the image of his sweet Kat wasn't enough anymore to help him perform with Lisa. Thankfully, there were advantages to being a brother owner. Eventually, Lisa came back down to earth with a thud, and he braced himself for the upcoming accusations. Or do you not love me anymore? Is that it? Is there someone else, Peter? You remember what I told you about anyone else, don't you? Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wild. My love, there is you, only you, forever you, he replied, kissing her while picturing her sister once again. Oh, Peter, I knew it. I knew we were meant to be, all those years ago. She tried to grab him again. My love, I must go. I will try to accompany you on your return to the Vale. We could spend time together then. Oh yes, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Just you and I, with no one else around. It would be a dream, my love. A horrible, nightmarish dream, he thought as he left the room. After exiting the personal apartment he kept in the Tower of the Hand, he thanked the Seven for finding the hidden passage to and from his room, even if he wished he hadn't discovered it with Lisa right beside him. Peter walked to the throne room to meet with the Hand and the King, preparing to once again witness the delicate dance Jon Arryn had to perform to keep Robert's temper in check. The man was nothing more than a big child, threatened to take away his toys, and he would rage and rage. Give him what he wanted, and he was as docile as a babe. Jon Arryn had figured this out long ago, though events had conspired against him, creating the problems they now faced. If only Tywin Lannister had taken better care to protect himself. The old lion could have been bled dry for years, with gold flowing in endlessly to keep the king entertained. But ever since the White Lion had taken over, that flow had ceased. Instead, the gold was heading north, to Lannisport, shipped off to keeps, anywhere but to them. For Peter, this situation presented both opportunities and challenges. The more he was relied upon, the higher he could rise. However, with the dwindling coin, there were far fewer chances to enrich himself. His brothels were thriving, better than most, but what good was being the master of coin if he had to beg, borrow, and steal just to keep the realm afloat? As he walked into the throne room, he noticed the king and his Hand already engaged in an argument. If it weren't for the short-sightedness of one and the stubbornness of the other, they might have had roses to pluck, and Peter would be the one growing strong. Your Grace. Lord Hand, Peter greeted. Peter, Jon Arryn said with a soft smile. Littlefinger, Robert replied, his tone devoid of warmth. Perhaps you can explain the situation to His Grace, Peter, Jon urged. Lord Hand. His Grace believes we don't need the Tyrells' gold and refuses to allow them to marry into his family, Jon said grumpily. A bunch of grasping roses. You think I'd allow any of them near my children after what they did in the rebellion? Robert snapped angrily. Of course, Your Grace, but we must think of the future. They're the richest house in the land, and with them tied to the crown, we'd gain a valuable ally, Peter replied. Tie them to my house. After what they did? They tried to take my home. No, they'll never marry into my line. I won't have it. If they wanted their damn rose arses on the throne, they should have fought harder during the rebellion. I'll be damned if I'm giving them a crown now. Your Grace, without their coin, we're in serious trouble, Jon Arryn said. Instead of the desired reaction, Robert. The king burst out laughing. Things must be bad if old Jon here is cursing. But it matters not. My son will marry Ned's daughter, and that's that. His is the only blood I'll see on the throne alongside mine. Your Grace, there may be another way, Peter interjected, catching Jon Arryn's confused gaze. I met Lord Mace last night, and he suggested they might be willing to settle for a second son, Peter continued. Jon smiled. He mentioned the same to me. I think it could work. Did you both not hear me? I will not reward traitors, Robert snapped. Your Grace, given Tommen's age, we could delay the betrothal and use the Tyrells until other sources of income become available, Peter proposed. Other sources? Robert asked, intrigued. I'm working on a few ideas, Your Grace, but we need stability now, Peter replied. My boy is but a babe. But betrothals don't mean weddings, do they? That old hag Olenna should know that, Robert laughed. Indeed, Your Grace, Jon Arryn agreed. Fine. Offer them Tommen, but I meant what I said. They won't get a marriage out of me, Robert said as he strode away. Insufferable man, Jon Arryn muttered as the king left the room. He is the king, my lord, Peter reminded him. Don't remind me, Jon chuckled. You really think the withered rose will go for this? I think they're desperate to be tied to the crown, my lord. We should make the offer anyway, Peter replied. Aye, we should. What's this about other forms of income? I have a couple of ideas, my lord. Not sure if they'll work, but we might be able to take some of the Lannister coin for ourselves. Taxes? Jon Arryn asked, skeptical. Oh, I think we should be more direct than that, my lord, Peter said with a laugh. I'll leave it in your hands, Peter. Any word on Varys? No, my lord. It's most strange. Perhaps we should consider a new master of whisperers. We'll give him some more time. If he's not back within the moon, we'll replace him. Any ideas? Oh, one or two, my lord, Peter replied as he and Jon walked out of the room, unaware of the little girl retreating into the shadows. Starfall, 294 AC. Ashera watched as Cregan and Ned sparred. Her little nephew was thrilled to have an older boy to practice with, and he had taken to following Cregan around. Her son, too, seemed grateful for the new friendship. Sitting with Illyria, her sister, Ashera felt a bond grow quickly between them, as if they had known each other forever rather than just recently meeting. Illyria was bright, beautiful, and smart, but she was also more cautious around boys than she had been before. Perhaps it was because she hadn't met the right one yet. Ashera reflected that she had been much like her sister once. Maybe it was Harrenhal that had changed her. Setting aside her sewing, Ashera walked to the edge of the small terrace that overlooked the Torrentine. The river shimmered in the sunlight, and as she gazed at it, her eyes began to well with tears. She quickly wiped them away when laughter echoed from the yard. I got you, Ned exclaimed. You did. You're getting better. Am I really? Ned's voice was laced with doubt. Of course you are. Now come on, it's my turn, so watch out, Cregan said, and the sound of Illyria's giggles made Ashera turn to her. It's good to hear him laugh like that, Illyria remarked. Does he not laugh much, sister? Ashera asked. No, I think he's lonely. Well, he has Cregan now, Ashera said. But for how long? Illyria suddenly jumped from her seat and stormed off. Ashera shook her head. Her sister was right, this was all temporary. Once Arthur made contact with the king, she and Cregan would join him, most likely in Casterly Rock, despite her brother's protests. Cregan needed to be with the other side of his family too. Despite everything, Jaehaerys was both a Stark and a Targaryen. For Arthur, however, the thought that Jaime Lannister was achieving what he himself had failed to do was nearly unbearable. When Ulrich had shared some of the events that unfolded while they were away, both of them had been left stunned. The things Jaehaerys had accomplished were astounding. He was truly his father's son, Arthur had remarked. But when Ulrich revealed that the boy was Jaime Lannister's squire, Arthur nearly lost control. It took both Ashera and Ulrich to hold him back. Only the news that the boy had been raised as Ned Stark's bastard managed to calm that particular storm, although it ignited a whole new one. He what? He raised him as a bastard, the true king. Arthur raged. Arthur, he kept him alive, Ashera replied. There's more to life than just living, Ash. What about the Stark honor? What about their precious packs? Arthur's voice rose. Arthur, quiet. Someone might hear you. Don't defend him, Ash. Not you. I won't. I barely knew him, Arthur. That was the truth. They had danced, and he had tried to flirt, but it was clumsy. His words were those of a boy, while Ashera needed, and eventually found, a man. Brandon was everything Ned was not: confident, brash, loud. He stole her heart the moment she first saw him and broke it in the end. Yet he left her with a piece of himself, a part that embodied the best of them both. As she looked down at their son, she smiled softly. "My husband, my love, my heart, look at our boy," she whispered. Richard Lonmouth. 294 AC. It had been years since he last set foot on Driftmark, so many that he barely recognized the place. Yet the castle itself was familiar. He had been granted entry quickly. Once they saw his willingness to surrender his weapons, they were more than happy to allow him access. Now, he waited for his turn to see A part of him missed Lucerys, but another part was relieved that it was the son he would be dealing with instead of the father. Lucerys, while fiercely loyal to the Targaryens, had always leaned more toward Aerys than Rhaegar. The old guard had benefited from Aerys' madness, while the younger generation recognized the looming disaster and the hope Rhaegar represented. Montfort was someone he could manage, especially given how far they had fallen, that alone would make them eager to join the king. However, for the Valerians, the old ties ran much deeper. "I do not know if we are ready to build such alliances yet, Sir," Jon said. "I understand, my king. But the longer you wait, the more discontent may brew among them. Explain yourself." "My king, you are working with the Lannisters. I know the reasons and I believe you when you say they can be trusted, but to those who have remained loyal to your family, they are the enemy. They will always be seen as the enemy." "We only make friends with our enemies, Sir Richard," Jon replied. "True, my king," Richard nodded. "But I fear that some may have issues knowing the Lannisters were aware of things for much longer than they let on." "Who?" Jon asked. "Who, my king? Who do you intend to approach?" "Lord Derry, the Valerians, and a few individuals I know I can trust." "Dorne?" "No, my king. I fear Dorne would create problems of a different sort." "Not with the right incentive, Richard." "Very well, you may proceed as you see fit. As for Dorne, I have an idea." The king's voice held a note of determination. Once he left this place, he would focus on executing that idea, but for now, his duty was here. As the last petitioner before him finished, he stepped forward. "My lord, my name is Elaine, a humble trader." "I come to you with a proposal," Richard said, raising his head to meet Montfort's gaze. It took a moment for recognition to dawn, but when it did, the lord smiled. "Indeed, perhaps we can discuss this in a more private setting." "Orain, see our guest to my solar," Montfort said. He was led out of the hall and down a corridor into a small solar. The silver-haired bastard of Driftmark offered him a drink, which he accepted, settling in to wait for Montfort's arrival. It didn't take long. The lord entered, clearly having rushed, his face flushed and slightly out of breath. "Is it you? Is it really you, Richard?" Montfort asked, closing the door behind him. It is, my friend. It's been a long time." "That it has, Richard. We feared you dead." "I may as well have been for a while, but I'm fine now, Montfort." "Better than fine, I have a purpose." "Brother, who is this man?" Orain inquired. "This brother is Sir Richard Lonmouth, the Knight of Skulls and Kisses and former squire of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen." Orain gave Richard a once-over before a small smile appeared on his face as recognition dawned. He barely remembered Orain, having met him only a couple of times when he was a boy, but he was glad to see the smile nonetheless. "What have you been up to, Richard? What were you doing all those years?" Orain asked. "Nothing. I lost myself after the Trident. It took a long time and the right reason to find myself again." I know how that feels, Richard." "So, what brought you back?" Montfort asked, curiosity evident in his tone. "Before I tell you that, do you still adhere to your loyalties, to your words?" "We do," both brothers replied in unison. Then let me tell you about the boy I met, Richard said, laughing. When he finished, both brothers looked at him in shock. Owain quickly filled 2 glasses, handing one to his brother while he emptied the other himself before refilling and handing it to Richard. I met the boy, brother, during the tourney of Lannisport. He seemed like a good lad, though we fell out over Jaime Lannister, Owain said softly. I don't understand it, Richard. Jaime Lannister, I don't understand, Montfort said. I don't either, Montfort. The king trusts him. He's his most loyal man, considering everything he's achieved and the fact that he was raised as a bastard, Richard said, a hint of conviction in his voice. But he killed his grandfather, our king, Owain countered. He killed a madman. Aerys was beyond help, and we all knew it. Had Rhaegar been a lesser man, he might have done the same. I know he thought about it, especially with how his mother was treated, Richard replied. If the king can unite the Westerlands and the North with loyal men, we might have a chance. Robert isn't the man he used to be. Given time to prepare, we could make this work. But we'll need more. What about the Reach? Montfort asked. I've seen the king with the Tyrell girl, Montfort. It's a match waiting to happen, Richard said, a smile breaking across his face. The Westerlands, the North, the Reach, we could actually do this, Montfort said, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. What about the ships? Owain chimed in. What do you mean? Richard asked. Those massive ships the Lannisters have. They could wipe any navy off the map, Owain said, laughing. The ships the king designed, Richard said proudly. Owain filled the 3 glasses once again and handed one to Montfort and Richard. Fire and blood, Richard declared. Fire and blood, Montfort and Owain echoed in unison. Waking up earlier than usual, Tyrion found himself face to face with a new tormentor, one that was starting to rival Ghost for the title. The black cat had somehow made its way into his locked room, and the sight of it perched on his table sent a shiver down his spine. Just thinking about how it managed to get in would haunt his dreams, but waking up to that feline stare was enough to keep him on edge. When the cat was with his cousin, it was almost pleasant, but up close, it was anything but. He silently prayed it would let him leave without a scratch. As soon as he moved, the hissing began. He could feel its eyes on him while he dressed, and he hurriedly made his way to the door, only to have the cat dart across his feet, almost causing him to scream. Later, he would swear that as the cat dashed down the hall, it turned back and smirked at him. Damn Jon Snow, he muttered as he left his room. When he arrived in the hall, he found he was the only member of his family there. He quickly grabbed his meal and sat down, looking forward to the burned bacon. Usually, he only broke his fast in the hall if family members were joining him, otherwise, he preferred to eat in his solar. But after his unsettling encounter with the black cat, he felt more at ease in the company of others. He ate at a leisurely pace and was soon joined by his aunt, her husband, and their children, Joy, and to his dismay, the black cat that his cousin would undoubtedly be feeding at their table. A part of him wanted to finish quickly and retreat to his room, but he didn't want to be rude. Instead, he shot a challenging glance at the cat, which thankfully ignored him. Morning, Aunt Emmon, he greeted. Morning, Tyrion. You're up early, Jenna replied. I had a visitor this morning, Tyrion said, nodding towards the cat. I told you to lock your rooms, she chided. I did, but he still managed to get inside, Tyrion said, watching as Joy offered the cat some of her meal. No, Balon, you don't like toast, Joy giggled, as the cat proved her wrong. At moments like this, Tyrion wondered why the cat made him so uncomfortable. There was something off about it, almost protective, like Ghost, but where Ghost's size scared people off, the cat used its claws. That wasn't quite it, though. The cat often seemed far too intelligent, as if it knew exactly what it was doing. Just as he was thinking this, the damn thing looked at him, and he had enough. He grabbed the last piece of bacon and made his way to his solar, bidding farewell to his family as he did. However, on his way, he was interrupted by the maester rushing toward him, carrying a scroll. "My lord, a message for you from Lannisport," Craylan said, handing him the scroll marked with his uncle's seal. Tyrion quickly opened it and read, his shock evident. Dornish ships were in the bay, bearing the Martell royal banner. "Maester, send a message back to my uncle. Tell him I'm on my way," Tyrion instructed. He called for Dara and sent the boy to fetch his aunt before making his way to his guards. He needed one of them to summon the captain of the household guard. As he did, he regretted having sent Adam away. Dorne hadn't officially attended anything in the Seven Kingdoms since shortly after the rebellion. The last notable event was when Prince Oberyn had participated in a tourney, which had left the Tyrell heir a cripple. To his knowledge, that was the last time the Martells had even set foot in the kingdoms. He recalled how Oberyn had visited Casterly Rock with his sister many years ago, but given the events in King's Landing and their rumored involvement, the Martells had no love for the Lannisters. Tyrion's mind raced as he walked to his solar. Why now, of all times, would they come? Was it because his brother was in the north? Or perhaps due to their increased trade deals? Did the Dornish want to open up trading routes with them? While those reasons were plausible, they seemed unlikely. He hated being in the dark, especially when dealing with a family whose most erratic member was notorious for his use of poisons. As he continued to ponder, his aunt and the captain of the guards entered the room. He hadn't even heard them knock. "Tyrion, what's so important that you've taken me for my breakfast?" Jenna asked, annoyance clear in her voice. "It seems we have visitors. But please, one moment, Aunt. Carl, I need you to arrange a large company of men to escort me to Lannisport. It needs to be done immediately. Also, I want extra guards at all the gates. No one is allowed access unless it's cleared with me. Aunt, is that understood?" "It is, my lord." "We shall be ready within the hour," Carl replied, turning to leave. "Tyrion, what's going on? Has something happened? Is anyone hurt?" his aunt asked, worry etched on her face. "No, no one's hurt, Aunt," Tyrion reassured her, relieved to see her expression soften. "Dorne has sent some ships to Lannisport, one bearing the royal banner." "What? Why would they?" Jenna asked, bewildered. "Exactly what I've been trying to figure out. I need to go to Lannisport, Aunt. I leave the rock in your capable hands." Tyrion stood up from his seat. "Tyrion, be careful," Jenna cautioned as he moved toward the door. He smiled back at her, but nearly tripped over a black cat that dashed past him, chased by a laughing Joy. "Balon, no. Run, walk." Joy giggled as she hurried by. In 294 AC, Arthur arrived in Sunspear, only to find himself caught up in another scheduled departure that delayed his own plans. He discovered that Oberyn was setting off for Lannisport, and his concern for the king almost compelled him to stow away on the ship. It was only while inspecting the vessel that he regained his composure, reminding himself that Jaehaerys was in the north and wouldn't return before he made it to the west. Still, it struck him as strange and worrying that Oberyn had chosen this moment to head west. He would need to keep a close eye on his old friend once he arrived. It took Arthur nearly 3 days to find a ship bound for Lannisport. The trade route wasn't one the Dornish typically used or cared for, so he ended up on a northern vessel with a rather intriguing name, the Western Wolf. It was unlike any ship he had ever seen, larger, sleeker, and much faster. He had to use all his powers of persuasion just to secure a spot on board, as they usually didn't take passengers. In the end, it was his claim of attending his sister's wedding that convinced the crew to let him aboard. As he settled in, he couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would lead to unexpected challenges ahead. Arthur couldn't help but marvel at how heavily armed the ship was. Scorpions and crossbowmen were stationed everywhere. When he asked the crew about it, they merely shrugged, explaining that the ship was too important to be left unprotected. He wondered how any enemy vessel could get close enough to pose a threat, especially since, within a week of sailing, they had already passed the Dornish ships carrying Oberyn and left them behind. "Thought I'd find you here, demon," the large, rotund knight said as he approached. "I like the view, Ser Wyllis," Arthur replied, smiling at the man. He had considered using his real name. After all, it had been 10 years since anyone had heard of him, but in the end, Demon Sand felt like the better choice. "Aye, it is a good one," Wyllis said, as they both gazed over the deck of the ship. The night sky was clear, and the stars shimmered on the water. "Your ship still amazes me, Ser," Arthur said sincerely. "It's a fine ship, is it not? My brother commands its twin when he's at sea, but the Wolf is mine," Wyllis said proudly. "A fine name, the Western Wolf. But you're from the north, are you not?" "I am, demon, and proud of it. But the ship is named after its designer, not me," Wyllis replied. "Jon Snow, the Western Wolf," Wyllis smiled as he said the name. Arthur had to bite his tongue. This was the ship his brother had told him about, the one his king had designed. Looking around again, he felt even more in awe of it. "I've heard of the lad. Didn't he do something with mines?" Arthur asked. "I made the Lannisters even more gold," Wyllis laughed. "Not bad for a bastard," Arthur remarked. "Jon Snow's as fine a lad as you're likely to meet," Wyllis said, his tone turning serious. "I meant no offense, Ser." "There's nothing wrong with being born on the wrong side of the sheets," Arthur replied. "Aye, true that. You would know too. It's a hard life, but that lad has done so much with his already," Wyllis said fondly as he turned to leave. Arthur couldn't do anything but agree. When Ulrich shared the tales of Jaehaerys' achievements, a genuine smile spread across his face, one he hadn't worn in years. Seeing Rhaegar's son accomplish so much was more than he could have ever hoped for. But when Ulrich mentioned that Jaehaerys had been squired to Jaime Lannister, it almost overwhelmed him. He had to hear the rest of the story to stop himself from rushing to the rock immediately. "His uncle squired him to a man who broke his oath, a man who killed his king," Arthur said angrily. "It was better than the life he would have had, Arthur," Ulrich replied. "How can you say that? How is it better? The boy is the king. Had things been different, he would have grown up a prince, surrounded by a loving family. I was talking about the life he was leading before Jaime Lannister named him squire. What about it? Ned Stark raised him as his bastard son, Arthur." At that, Arthur felt his anger boil over. Ned, Howland, Jaime, he didn't know which one he was angrier at. He tried to think rationally. Ashera had done her best to calm him down, but it had taken a long time for him to stop blaming himself. His king had been raised as a bastard, and he had been told everything was fine, that Jaehaerys was happy and there was no need for him to come home. Had it not been for Jaime Lannister, who knew what kind of life Ned Stark had envisioned for him? That alone was something he needed to wrap his mind around. Jaime had taken Jaehaerys on as a squire, training him well enough that the young boy had won not one, but 2 tournaments and even managed to unhorse Edmure Tully in an honor duel. When he heard that, pride swelled in Arthur's chest. Jaehaerys had called out the Tullys for their duplicity and treason, fighting for his father's and mother's honor. Whether it was the boy's own determination or the lessons Jaime Lannister had taught him, Arthur was eager to find out. As the news about his king spread, Arthur found himself increasingly eager to meet Jaehaerys. He had felt deflated upon hearing that the group had headed north, and he contemplated whether he should try to catch up with them. But Ulrich's rational thinking prevailed. What if he arrived only to find they had already left? The thought of missing them gnawed at him. There was a chance he could make it in time, but if he didn't, it could be moons before he had another opportunity. Reluctantly, he agreed to head to Lannisport instead of the north. "We'll pack our things. Cragen needs to meet his other kin," Ashera said. "Ash, you can't. I need to go alone first. It may not be safe for you and Cregan. I need to see him and decide, Arthur replied. You're not leaving us behind, Arthur. I know that, Ash. I wouldn't dare. But please, wait until I'm certain, all right? Fine, I'll wait for now, Ashera conceded. With a final glance at the sky, Arthur made his way down to the room he had been given. It wasn't large, but compared to most cabins he had stayed in on a ship, it felt enormous and comfortable. He lay down on the bed, and before long, he was fast asleep. The next morning, he awoke to the stillness of the ship. Startled, he jumped up, splashed water on his face, and quickly left his room. His sword was ready to be drawn at a moment's notice, and though it wasn't dawn, it would serve him well if needed. As he reached the deck, he saw they were already docked in Lannisport. Ser Wylis greeted him with a quick smile. Ah, you're up, demon. I was about to send for you, but I figured you'd wake when you did. When did we arrive? Arthur asked. Early this morning. You ever been here before? No, Arthur lied. Well, I recommend the Golden Maiden. It has decent rooms and good food, plus a fine northern ale, Wylis smirked. Thank you, sir, for the voyage and the company, Arthur said, extending his hand. It was a pleasure, demon. Should you ever find yourself in White Harbor, you would be more than welcome at the Merman's Court, Wylis replied, shaking his hand firmly. Arthur smiled at him and disembarked from the ship. It took him nearly an hour to locate the tavern Wylis had recommended, but when he finally arrived, he was glad he had made the effort. He enjoyed a hearty breakfast of eggs and bacon, followed by a fresh lemon. Afterward, he was shown to his room. The price was a bit steep, but he figured it was worth it. Placing his belongings in a small chest at the foot of the bed, Arthur decided to explore the town and reacquaint himself with the landscape. Just as he was about to head out, a knock at the door caught his attention. It's been a long time, old friend, Richard Lonmouth said as he stepped into the room. Jon Arryn, 294 AC. Every time Arthur heard news about Jaime Lannister or Jon Snow, it stirred his anger, and this instance was no exception. The thought of Jaime Lannister marrying a heathen was something he could never have imagined, let alone accept. The idea that a southern lord of Jaime's stature would wed a tree worshipper was beyond his comprehension. Arthur had spent the day poring over his books, searching for a legal way to strip Jaime of his wardenship. He even explored the other houses in the west to see if there was one capable of taking over, but to no avail. He knew it was a foolish endeavor, yet he had wasted his day fixated on the fact that Jaime Lannister's pet bastard had somehow coerced him into marrying a northerner. In his frustration, he had even arranged a meeting with the High Septon, only to discover that Jaime was already married in one faith and planned to marry again in the Light of the Seven at a ceremony in Casterly Rock. The High Septon had been quite pleased by this news, likely worried about the potential loss of influence, or more likely, the loss of gold, should Jaime's situation continue to unfold. Jon felt a surge of annoyance as he reflected on the Lannisters' departure from the light. It was infuriating that he seemed powerless to change the course they were taking. Instead of guiding them toward righteousness, it felt like the opposite was happening, and this was never part of the plan. All those years of hard work, all the strategies he had devised, and even after getting rid of the dragon and his northern mistress, the damn wolves continued to cause him trouble. The fact that it was a bastard wolf only deepened his frustration. He picked up his cup and hurled it against the wall. Watching it shatter did nothing to ease his anger. My lord, is everything all right? Yes, it's fine. Send someone to clean this up and get me the Master of Coin, Jon replied sharply. At once, my lord, the steward said, leaving with the two guards Jon hadn't even noticed were there. He hadn't felt this angry since he learned what Jon Snow and the Tyrell girl had done with their coin. Spending money on the small folk was one thing, but squandering their funds was entirely unacceptable. He had been nearly apoplectic when he found out, and it only got worse when Jaime Lannister had done the same. He did what? Apparently, he and the young Rose used the coin to buy food for the small folk in Flea Bottom, Peter said. They used my coin for this? Jon asked incredulously. Aye, my Lord Hand. Apparently, Lord Jaime has given his winnings as well. When Jon had informed Robert, the king had just laughed. Just like Ned he is. Robert had shouted happily. Sometimes, Jon wondered if he had made a huge mistake with that boy. Robert still had a blind spot for Ned Stark, and it seemed that blind spot had now extended to the bastard too. But Robert could never face hard truths. Even now, despite everything, he had rewritten Lyanna Stark into the love of his life, when in reality, the woman had wanted nothing to do with him. Jon could still picture Robert as a crying, pathetic mess when she told him she'd never marry him. It had taken hours to fix that delusion in the fool's mind. She's just playing hard to get, Jon had reassured him, but even he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Robert, don't you love the thrill of the chase? Jon mused. There was a time when he could persuade Robert to act on a whim, but lately, that had become increasingly difficult. You called for me, my lord? Peter asked as he entered the room. Jon smiled warmly at his friend. I did, Peter. Did you hear the news about Jaime Lannister? I did, my lord. It's surprising, isn't it? I heard her grace did not take it well at all. No, she did not, Jon replied, shuddering at the memory of the Queen's fury. So, how may I help, my lord? Peter inquired. Jon felt grateful that at least one person around him seemed to understand the situation. Those plans you had regarding the Lannisters, are they underway? They're ready to go, my lord. Should I proceed? Yes, hurt them, Peter. Hurt them a lot. I will, my lord. We'll see the benefits quite soon, Peter assured him before getting up to leave. Jon poured himself a glass of wine and sipped it slowly. They needed coin, and Peter's plans would provide a significant amount. Once he resolved that issue, he could begin to address the others. Marjorie, 293 AC. They had finally arrived. As she stepped out of the wheelhouse, a smile lit up her face. Highgarden was a welcome sight. She rushed forward and embraced Willis, who she hadn't seen in what felt like ages. After that, she turned to Garland, surprised and delighted to see him. Welcome home, my sweet sister. May I introduce you to Lady Lyanette Fossaway? Garland said. My lady, it's an honor to meet you, Marjorie said with a graceful curtsy. The honor is mine, my lady, Lyanette replied, mirroring her curtsy. It took a few more minutes to complete the introductions. Marjorie noticed her grandmother growing impatient, especially as they met Lady Lyanette's parents. Taking her grandmother by the arm, she guided her inside. It was technically rude, but she caught the smile Garland shot her and the look of relief on his face. Marjorie could see the appreciation in the Fossaway faces, and even her grandmother wore a half-smile as they walked together. I'm afraid I was about to bite into an apple, sweetling, Olenna said, smirking. No, grandmother, I was afraid you were about to devour one, Marjorie replied, and her grandmother laughed. When she finally reached her room, Marjorie jumped onto her bed, reflecting on her enjoyable time in the capital. She and Jon had accomplished something incredible, something worthwhile. Yet, it was her moments with Jon that lingered in her thoughts. Seeing her brothers upon her return reminded her of the one who was not there, which in turn brought Jon back to her mind. She wondered how long it would be until she saw them both again. As she lay in bed, drifting off to sleep, thoughts of when she would dance again danced in her mind. A few hours later, she awoke to find herself a mess, her hair tangled, her dress crumpled. Embarrassed, she glanced at the pillow she had wrapped herself around and blushed at the dream from which she had just awakened. Maid, she called for her handmaiden. After changing and dressing, she felt ready to face the world again. Heading to the hall, she anticipated dinner. Upon arrival, she noticed everyone was in a joyous mood. Marjorie, my dear. Come, we have such wondrous news, her mother called. However, the look her grandmother shot her made Marjorie skeptical of the news's true nature. Of course, Mama, she said as she took her seat. My dear, your brother Garland is to be wed to Lady Leonette, her mother announced, her smile radiant. Oh, Mother, that is wonderful. Brother, my lady, I am overjoyed for you both. Marjorie exclaimed, her own smile brightening. I thank you, my lady, Leonette replied, and Marjorie noticed the girl's parents beaming with pride. She turned to her brother, who looked happier than she could ever remember him being. Willis, too, appeared happy, though he seemed a bit more reserved, and was that a hint of regret she spotted in his expression? Marjorie noticed her grandmother's proud expression, though it seemed her gaze was more focused on Marjorie than on Garland. The meal they shared was as delightful as she remembered, and the dessert was even better. Despite being just a family gathering and not an official betrothal announcement, the feast was extravagant. At one point, as she glanced at the waste on the table, guilt washed over her, making her think of those back in King's Landing. Before those feelings could take root, her mother leaned in and whispered, "There are some letters for you, sweetling." Maester Lomace dropped them off. Letters from whom, Mother? Marjorie asked, her voice quiet yet brimming with excitement. From the north, my dear, Allery replied, and a smile spread across Marjorie's face as she took the letters. There were 3 in total, 2 letters and a raven, one sealed with a rose, the others with a dire wolf. She had to resist the urge to rush back to her bedroom to read them. Instead, she carefully tucked them into the pocket of her dress and waited for the right moment to ask to be excused. Once she left the hall, she hurried back to her room. Almost impatiently, she sat while her handmaiden let down her hair and helped her out of her dress. After bidding the girl good night, Marjorie grabbed the letters and jumped into bed, starting with the raven. Just Marjorie, we have arrived in the north safe and well, though I find myself missing your company greatly. I wish you could be here to see my homeland, but perhaps someday you'll allow me to take you to visit. Until then, I shall have to settle for the favor you gave me and know that I carry a piece of you with me always. Just John. She leaned over to her jewelry box, opened it, and carefully placed the raven scroll inside the small handkerchief, alongside her other letters. Laying back on the bed, she gently wiped her face with the handkerchief before turning to read her brother's letter. My dearest sister, the north is well, it's cold, that's the first thing you should know, very, very cold. It's also quite beautiful in its own way, not like Highgarden. The landscape stretches out, not vibrant in color but beautiful in its shades of gray and darkness. John and I are enjoying it almost as much as Ghost, who seems the happiest of us all to be back in the north. White Harbor is an incredible city, and the Manderleys are very welcoming. We've made some new friends, and Lord Manderley's granddaughters truly love to dance. I miss you all so much, especially you, sister. I look forward to seeing you soon. Love, Loras. Marjorie frowned at that. Why would Loras mention Lord Manderley's granddaughters? Did he dance with them? What about John? Would his birth matter to the Lord of White Harbor? She began to ponder everything she knew about the Manderleys. John had helped them with trade and ships, he was from the north, a son, even if he was a natural one, of their liege lord. Would that mean something? Would that make up for it? Her thoughts spiraled, and she quickly opened John's letter, hoping to find clarity. Just Marjorie, it began. I hope this letter finds you well and that our project in the capital isn't causing you too much discomfort. I feel terrible leaving it all in your hands, though I can't think of anyone better suited for the task. While I'm happy to be back in the north and to have the chance to visit my family, I wish it didn't have to be this way. I wish I could travel to Highgarden and see your home. Perhaps it's the company I miss more than the place. If you were here with me, maybe that would make this journey more tolerable. Or if I were there with you, perhaps I wouldn't miss the north so much. What I do know is that I miss you, your smile, your laughter, our dances. So maybe I know something after all. I look forward to seeing you when I return. Each day we travel, I know that return grows closer. Every morning, when I wake, I look at the favor you gave me, and I do the same each night. Though it's not the same as speaking to you, I find myself occasionally talking to it as if you were here with me instead. Ghost misses you too, though he'd never admit it. I know he longs for the pats you give him on the head and the rubs on his belly. Loras misses you as well, even if he stays silent about it. I can tell he feels the absence of family, and you are the one he misses the most. So remember, my lady, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you are always missed and thought of. Just Jon. Marjorie felt tears welling in her eyes and reached for her handkerchief to wipe them away. She glanced back down at the letter, a smile forming on her lips. Reading it once more, she placed it among the other letters in her jewelry box. Lying back down on her pillow, she turned over to go to sleep and whispered, "I miss you too, Just Jon." In the crypt, the air was cold and dark, yet for old Nan, it was still the place where she felt most at home. She walked among the statues, a wave of sadness washing over her as she approached the three newest ones. Ricard's emotions conflicted within her. She mourned the loss of her lord, but also recognized that he was partly responsible for what had happened. His desire to connect with the South, to be more than he was, had led to tragic consequences. Had he listened to his children, Brandon would be with the woman he loved, and poor Lyanna. Nan moved to Lyanna's statue and closed her eyes, envisioning the girl as she truly was, not just this poor imitation in stone. The statue failed to capture her spirit as a horsewoman or the wild, untamed essence she had in life. It didn't show her playfully sparring with her beloved Walder. She had forbidden him from fighting, but when it came to Lyanna, he could never refuse. If her brothers turned her away, Walder was always there to step in. "He'll be here soon, my lady," she said softly, touching her hand to the statue before leaving the crypt. As she made her way through the yard, she noticed the Greyjoy boy sneaking out, no doubt heading off to Wintertown again. She shook her head in disappointment. What Ned was thinking was beyond her, an Ironborn here, in these halls. The halls were oppressive enough, but to treat him as a ward was utterly ridiculous. The way he had influenced young Robb was even more troubling. It had been far too long since a true wolf had roamed this castle. As she entered the keep, she found her boy. While everyone else looked at Walder with pity, she couldn't bring herself to feel the same. He was her blood, and what did his words matter? "Hotter," Walder said cheerfully when he saw her. "Have you eaten, Walder?" "Hotter," he replied, nodding. "Good. Do you need to get your bath ready?" "Hotter, hotter," he shook his head. "Walder, you know it's time." "Hotter," he said softly before walking away. Once, her boy could speak. He could talk, smile, and make her laugh with his jokes, back when the wolves still roamed these halls and the pack was all that mattered. She glanced at the table where Ned and his wife sat. In some ways, they embodied the perfect lord and lady, but in others, they felt out of place. In another life, it would have been Brandon and his beloved seated there. Perhaps then Ned and Catelyn would have found a more suitable home, a place where southern courtesies and northern steel blended more harmoniously than in this wolf's den. "Jon will be here tomorrow, really, father?" Sansa asked excitedly. "Aye, my love. That's what Alan and Will said when Jory sent them back." "Is Lady Dacey with them? And Lady Lynesse?" "I'm so looking forward to the wedding, father." Sansa beamed, while Arya and Bran listened closely. "I don't think so, Sansa. I believe they returned to Bear Island," Lady Catelyn replied with a hint of annoyance. "But the wedding is still going ahead?" Sansa asked, concern creeping into her voice. "Aye, it is, my love," Ned assured her, though Lady Catelyn grimaced at the news. Nan observed the children. They weren't wolves yet, but soon they would be, she thought as she left the hall. She made her way to the room she had occupied for nearly 70 years. Tired but excited, she felt a mix of emotions bubbling within her. As she drifted off to sleep, a sense of urgency washed over her. The pup would be returning tomorrow, and soon the wolves would howl once more.